Ever notice how when someone stops valuing you, your first instinct is to try harder? You text more, you call more, you show up more, and somehow it only makes things worse. Here's the truth. Chasing people who don't value you will never earn you respect. It'll only drain your confidence. But there's a simple trick, and once you try it, you'll be shocked at how quickly things shift. You ever notice how when somebody starts pulling back from you, your gut reaction is to lean in harder? They don't call as much, so you call more. They stop putting in effort, so you double yours. And you tell yourself it's because you care. You just want to fix it. But here's the hard truth. The more you over-invest in someone who's under-invested in you, the more you're teaching them that your value is negotiable, that their bare minimum deserves your maximum effort. And that is not a trade you can afford to keep making. See, relationships, whether it's with a partner, a friend, a coworker, are like a seesaw. Balance is everything. When you're both sitting on opposite ends, it works. But when one person gets off, the other person is left sitting in the dirt, holding all the weight. That's what happens when you over-invest. You're trying to keep the seesaw moving when the other person isn't even on it anymore. And I get it. It feels like if you can just show them how much you care, they'll snap out of it. They'll see what they're missing, and suddenly the balance will come back. But here's what actually happens the more you try, the less they do. The more you prove, the less they appreciate, and the more you chase, the faster they run. Because people rarely value what they don't have to work for. The trick is to stop, to take a breath and step back, not out of anger, not to play games, not to manipulate, but simply because your energy is worth protecting. When you stop pouring so much into someone who isn't pouring back, you immediately send a different message, not to them, but to yourself. You remind yourself that your worth isn't measured by how hard you work to be seen. And here's the thing, pulling back doesn't mean you're giving up on people. It means you're giving up on imbalance. It means you're done with one-sided exchanges that leave you drained and resentful. Because real connection doesn't require convincing. It doesn't need to be forced or begged for. Real connection flows both ways. Let me put it this way. Imagine you're holding a cup of water. That cup is your energy, your time, your love, your attention. If you keep pouring it out to someone who's not even thirsty, you're left empty while they take it for granted. But if you hold on to that cup, if you sip it slowly and give only to people who value it, you'll notice something. Suddenly, the people who didn't appreciate it start to realize how much they miss it. Because what's rare gets respected. What's constant gets ignored. Now, the hardest part about pulling back is the discomfort. You're going to feel it. That urge to text them, to check in, to explain yourself. That little voice in your head that says, if I don't keep trying, I'll lose them. But ask yourself this, what exactly are you losing? Because if someone can only stay connected to you when you're doing all the work, is that really a connection at all? Or is it just you dragging something that should have been mutual? The truth is, you don't control whether or not they value you. You only control how much of yourself you're willing to spend trying to convince them. And the moment you stop overspending, one of two things will happen. Either they'll realize what they had and step back in, or they won't. And you'll finally have the space for someone who will. Both outcomes are wins. So the first step, the very first move, is to stop over-investing. Because the second you stop giving more than you're receiving, you shift the balance back where it belongs. You stop teaching people to take you for granted. And you start showing yourself that your value has never depended on their recognition. It's been there all along. And that's where everything starts to change. When you stop over-investing, the next step is something most people skip, but it's the one that makes the biggest difference. You set the silent boundary. Now, what I mean by that is this: you don't need to announce it, you don't need to explain it, and you don't need to get into a big dramatic conversation about it. A real boundary doesn't come with a speech. It comes with a shift in how you show up. Think about it. How many times have you told someone, I'm not going to tolerate this anymore, and then turned around and tolerated it anyway? How many times have you warned someone, if you keep doing that, I'm done, and then stayed? Every time that happens, your words lose weight, and people stop taking you seriously, not because they're cruel, but because you've shown them there are no real consequences. That's why the silent boundary is powerful, because it isn't something you tell people. It's something you show them through action. For example, maybe you've got a friend who only calls when they need something. You don't have to say, I'm tired of being used. You don't have to give them a lecture. Instead, you just stop dropping everything to meet their needs. You let the phone go to voicemail if it's not a good time. You take longer to respond, not to be cold, not to punish, but to protect your peace. And in that silence, they notice something's different. They realize you're not as available as you used to be. That's the silent boundary. Or maybe it's someone you're dating who keeps taking you for granted. You don't need to beg them to step up. You don't need to explain for the 10th time what's bothering you. You just stop putting yourself in positions where you're disrespected. You stop rearranging your life to fit their convenience. And when they notice the change, you don't explain it. You let the shift speak for itself. Because when you stop feeding the problem has to either adjust or fade away. The silence matters because it removes the back and forth argument. If you announce a boundary, you invite negotiation. You give the other person a chance to debate whether your feelings are valid. But a silent boundary doesn't need their approval. It doesn't need to be justified. It just is. And people can feel it. They feel the distance. They feel the difference. And they have to decide how they're going to respond to it. Now, here's the uncomfortable part. The silent boundary is not about controlling them. It's not about making them change. It's about controlling you. It's about deciding what you're willing to accept and then quietly living in alignment with that decision. That's why it works. Because you stop wasting energy trying to get them to see your worth, and you start spending energy protecting it yourself. And don't be surprised if, when you set this boundary, the other person pushes back. They might call you distant. They might accuse you of acting different. They might even try to guilt you into going back to the way things were. That's normal. When people are used to unlimited access, any limit feels like rejection. But stay steady, because the silent boundary isn't about punishing them. It's about respecting you. The beauty of this is that it works in every area of life. At work, it might look like not answering emails after hours. With family, it might look like excusing yourself from conversations that cross the line. With friends, it might look like letting go of being the only one who always reaches out. And the more you practice it, the lighter you feel, because suddenly you're not carrying the weight of over-explaining or defending yourself. You're just living your truth quietly and consistently. The silent boundary says, I don't need to shout. I don't need to convince. I don't need to prove. I simply need to choose. And once you choose to value yourself, people either rise to meet you at that level or they naturally fade out of your space. Both outcomes are clarity. Both outcomes are peace. And that's how you take your power back without ever raising your voice. When you stop over-investing and you set that silent boundary, the next step is where the real shift begins. You take all that time and all that energy you were spending trying to hold someone else up, and you start redirecting it back to you. And I don't mean in some vague self-care cliche way. I mean in a deliberate, consistent, unapologetic way. Because here's the truth. The more you focus on proving your value to someone else, the further you drift from actually living it yourself. Most of us don't realize how much we give away until we stop. You'll catch yourself reaching for your phone to send that extra text. Then remember, nope, I don't chase anymore. And suddenly you've got space to read something that feeds your mind, space to call a friend who actually shows up for you, space to just sit in quiet and breathe. That's the shift. It's not about filling your time with distractions so you don't think about the other person. It's about slowly reclaiming pieces of yourself you've been handing out for free. See, when you've been undervalued, you start living in reaction mode. Everything you do revolves around them, how they're acting, how they're treating you, whether they're noticing you. It's exhausting and it's disempowering. But when you turn that focus back inward, you stop waiting for their validation to tell you who you are. You start building it yourself. That's when you remember, I'm not just somebody's backup plan. I'm not just somebody's convenience. I'm a whole person with my own purpose. And here's the part that surprises people when you focus on you. You don't get smaller, you get brighter. You start radiating confidence without even trying. You walk into a room different. You speak different. You carry yourself different. And people notice, not because you're trying to make them notice, but because when you value yourself, it shows. That's why redirecting your focus works better than chasing. Chasing drains you. Self-focus fuels you. Maybe for you, that means pouring energy into your health or your career or your creativity. Maybe it means reconnecting with old friends you've neglected. Maybe it means finally doing something you've been putting off because you were too busy waiting by the phone. Whatever it looks like, the point is the same. You fill yourself up instead of emptying yourself out, because the version of you that's full, the version of you that's centered, that's the version people can't ignore. Now, I want to be clear. This isn't about pretending you don't care. It's not about slapping on a fake smile and saying, I'm fine. Redirecting focus doesn't mean denying the hurt. It means choosing not to camp there. You acknowledge the sting, you process it, but then you use that energy to build instead of break. You stop asking, why don't they see my worth? And you start asking, where can I see more of it myself? And when you do that, something interesting happens. The people who undervalued you begin to feel the absence of your energy. They notice that you're not orbiting around them anymore. And some of them will try to pull you back in. But here's the beauty. By the time they do, you're standing stronger. You don't need their recognition to feel whole. So you get to choose whether or not they even get access again. That's power. The truth is, you'll never lose by investing in yourself, because whether the other person wakes up and steps up or whether they drift away, you're still winning. You're healthier, you're clearer, you're more grounded. And those are things no one can take from you. So instead of asking how to get them to value you again, flip the question. Ask yourself, how can I start valuing me again? Because when you shift that focus, you stop chasing love and start attracting it. And that's the kind of shift no one can ignore. When you stop over investing, when you've set that silent boundary, and when you've started putting your energy back into yourself, there's still one more piece that matters just as much: how you handle the moment they test you. Because they will. People notice change, and when they feel the shift, they often push against it. They'll poke at it, question it, maybe even try to pull you back into the old pattern. And this is where you've got a choice. You can react or you can respond. The difference between the two is everything. Reacting is fast. It's emotional. It's defensive. It's snapping back with anger when they accuse you of being distant. It's firing off a text when they ignore you. It's trying to explain yourself over and over when they act confused about why things are different. Reacting feels good in the moment because it's like letting steam out of a boiling pot. But here's the problem: when you react, you hand them control. You let their behavior dictate yours. You give them the keys to your emotions. Responding, on the other hand, is slower. It's calmer. It's intentional. When you respond, you're not ignoring what's happening. You're choosing how to meet it. That might mean answering with one clear sentence instead of a long explanation. It might mean taking a breath before you text back. It might even mean saying nothing at all. Silence, when it's calm and grounded, is one of the strongest responses you can give. The reason responding is powerful is because it shows you're no longer ruled by their attention or their lack of it. You're no longer chasing validation in every interaction. You're steady, and that steadiness speaks louder than any outburst could. Think about it. When someone expects you to blow up and instead you stay calm, it throws them off. When they expect you to beg and instead you hold your peace, it shifts the balance. That's how you teach people that your emotions aren't a toy. This doesn't mean you have to be cold. It doesn't mean you shut down and act like you don't care. Responding is about balance. It's about showing up with clarity instead of chaos. So instead of saying, why don't you ever appreciate me? You might simply say, I don't feel valued here. Short, clear, no drama. Or instead of blowing up when they disappear for days, you let your boundary do the talking. You stop making yourself so available when they come back around. That's a response. And here's something else to remember. When people lose the ability to trigger you, they lose the power to control you. If they can press every button and get the same explosion every time, they'll keep pressing. But when you take away the reaction, they're left with nothing to push against. That's when the dynamic starts to change. Some will respect it and adjust. Others will get frustrated and pull away. Either way, You win because you're not being dragged back into old patterns that drain you. Now, responding instead of reacting isn't easy at first. It takes practice. You'll catch yourself mid-reaction sometimes and have to pull it back. You'll feel the urge to explain, to overtalk, to prove your side. That's normal. But every time you choose a calmer response, you strengthen that muscle. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. Eventually, it's just who you are, someone who doesn't get thrown around by every storm. Think of it like this. Reacting is like being a passenger in a car someone else is driving. You're tossed around every time they hit the gas or slam the brakes. Responding is when you slide back into the driver's seat. You're still on the road with them, but you're controlling your own wheel. And that difference is everything. So when the tests come, and they will, don't let yourself get baited into the old dance. Pause, breathe, choose your response. Because the moment you do, you send the clearest message of alls. I'm in control of me, no matter what you choose to do. And that's when they realize they can't shake your peace. When you stop over investing, when you set that silent boundary, when you put the focus back on yourself, and when you learn to respond instead of react, something powerful happens. The tables turn. And it doesn't happen with a big dramatic moment. It happens quietly, almost subtly, but you'll feel it. The same dynamic that once left you chasing begins to shift, because the second you stop begging to be valued, you change the entire equation. People notice absence more than presence. When you were pouring yourself out, when you were always available, always giving, they got used to it. It became background noise. Like air conditioning, you don't notice it until it shuts off. And when you shut it off, when you stop feeding the one-sided pattern, the silence is loud. That's when they realize something's changed. And for the first time, they have to ask themselves, wait, did I just lose something I thought I'd always have? Now, here's the thing. Sometimes they step up. Sometimes the tables turn in a way that makes them rethink their behavior. They start to put in more effort. They initiate conversations. They look for ways to keep you around. And it's not because you begged for it. It's because you created space for them to choose. That's the beauty of pulling back and valuing yourself. It forces clarity. They either show up or they don't. Other times the tables turn differently. Instead of stepping up, they drift away completely. And while that can sting, it's actually one of the greatest gifts you can get. Because if someone leaves the moment you stop carrying the whole load, it proves they were never in it for the right reasons to begin with. And as painful as that realization is, it frees you. It clears the space for people who don't need to be convinced of your worth. Either way, you win. Because when the tables turn, it's no longer about whether they value you. It's about whether you're willing to keep valuing yourself. You stop living in that desperate place of, I hope they notice me. I hope they appreciate me. Instead, you stand in, I know my worth and I know what I will and won't allow. And that kind of confidence changes everything. And let's be honest, it feels good. It feels good to not be pulled around like a puppet on strings. It feels good to know that your emotions aren't tied to whether someone texts back or whether they give you crumbs of attention. It feels good to walk into a room or into a relationship knowing you don't need to beg for a seat at the table. You bring your own chair. That's the shift. That's the turn. But let me give you a warning. When the tables turn, not everyone will clap for you. Some people will resent the change. They'll accuse you of being selfish, cold, or different. And they're right. You are different. You're no longer the person who will tolerate being undervalued. You're no longer the person who's available at the cost of your own peace. And if that makes them uncomfortable, so be it. Because the tables turning isn't about them. It's about you reclaiming your ground. The most important part is that you don't lose yourself when this shift happens. Don't let someone stepping up lure you back into over-investing. Don't let guilt drag you into explaining boundaries you already set. Don't confuse their temporary panic with permanent change. Instead, watch. Pay attention to patterns, not promises. Because when the tables turn, people reveal who they really are. And it's your job to believe them the first time. And here's the truth you have to hold on tightly. When you stop begging to be valued, you create a life where value finds you naturally. You don't chase it. You don't plead for it. You don't force it. You live it. And when you live it, you attract it. So don't be afraid of the shift. Don't be afraid of the silence. or the distance or the change in dynamic. Because when the tables turn, you'll see something you may not have believed before. You were never powerless. You just needed to stop giving your power away. And that's when everything starts working in your favor. So when someone stops valuing you, don't chase, don't beg, don't pour yourself empty trying to prove what's already true. Pull back from overinvesting. Set that silent boundary. Shift the focus back to yourself. Respond instead of react, and then watch as the tables turn, not because you forced it, but because you finally remembered who you are. The truth is, you don't have to convince anyone of your worth. You only have to live it. And the moment you do, people will either rise to meet you or fade away. Either way, you win. Because the second you stop asking for value from others, you start giving it back to yourself. And that's when everything changes.